Don't you?
Yeah, maybe. I'll give you the signal.
If anyone wants a drink throughout, then by all means just grab one of us from Bespoke team, or just turn around and all the drinks behind you. That's fine. Toilets are downstairs if you don't already know. But I'm going to hand you off to Jez Cox, who's going to be hosting the sort of Q&A presentation, and Nate Bradley, president of Moots. So enjoy the talk, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you to everyone at Bespoke Cycling for hosting this today as well. It's a really nice opportunity for you to find out a little bit more about the brand, hear from Nate about where it's come from, where it's going, and talk tech as well. I'm very aware that we've got an awful lot of very knowledgeable people in here who know a lot about the brand of Moots. Can I get you to put up a hand if you actually own one already? I know there's quite a few of you. So we've got some hardcore fans. We might have others who have just come to find out a little bit more, and maybe others who just sort of looking around the room going, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind one of them. I'll count myself in that camp as well. Just before I come on to Nate, if you're wondering who on earth I am, you might have heard my voice. I do quite a lot of commentary for Eurosport, and I headline a few other things as well, like the Zwift racing, the Zwift games this weekend. I'm commentating on Get Wevelgem next weekend, so if any of you are watching that, you'll hear me leading on that one. So it's nice to be here with you guys, because I've not been to Bespoke Cycling before. It's really nice for you guys to be hosting us as well. So can I, first of all, get you to put your hands together for Nate, Mr. President. I have to confess, I walked in here and wondered what the flag was and was trying to read it. And Nate explained to me that it's beautifully hung, but it is, of course, hung the wrong way around. Yeah. Because it's supposed to be a C for Colorado. So Nate, you've explained to me a little bit about that. Most of you will know, or a lot of you will know a fair bit about the brand and why, of course, we have a US flag behind here. This is not a presidential kind of polling or anything like that. Nate, can you tell us a little bit about the brand Moots itself, where it's come from, and then also why you're here?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for coming out first and foremost. It's not just myself. I have my colleague back here, Hector Santiago. He's our international sales manager. He's been chatting with some of you guys as well, but appreciate everybody from Bespoke hosting us, and we're fresh off the plane, so if we're a little groggy, just put us back in line. So, but yes, so Moots Cycles, Colorado-based company since 1981. As Jess was mentioning, you know, the Colorado flag, the red part is the sea, the yellow is the sun, and meant to represent the sun. We get over 300 days of sun a year, believe it or not. The white is for the snow, and the blue is for the blue skies. So it's nice to see a little bit of hometown vibes there. So Steamboat Springs is in the northwest corner of Colorado, so it's a rectangle. So we're up in the mountains. The town is based at 6,700 feet, so fairly high, and peaks out over 10,000 feet. About 20,000 people, mainly a ski resort town, ski tourism since the early 80s, and now it's getting a lot of summer tourism as well, cycling events, big world-renowned gravel event, you know, other sporting events take place there. But the story so goes is that our founder was on a bike tour from Wisconsin in 1976, kind of, you know, was stopping along the way, raising some money, continuous tour, and fell in love with Steamboat as one of his stops, and kind of stayed on, worked at a bike shop, took frame building class in Eugene, Oregon in the late 70s, and then after a while he started honing his craft out of the back of the bike shop, you know, offering friends different bikes, making little custom models. And you know, think about the early 80s, that's like when mountain biking was starting, and we're really rural, so there's a lot of dirt, 2-track surfaces, so kind of these first off-road ATV bikes, he was making those. So in 1981, Moots got established as a brand, and it's kind of a unique story. I'll just digress here just real quickly.
Go for it.
So the caricature, the alligator, Mr. Moots. So where that came from was when he was a kid, he had a pencil topper eraser as a pencil topper. It was an alligator, and he kind of held on to it, named it Mr. Moots, kind of kept it with him as a memento for a long time. And it was synonymous for frame builders in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. To put their last name on the bike as their brand. That's like what everybody knew. Bikes were very similar in those days, you know, pretty much all the same construction, same diameter tubes. So your name was really what set them apart. Well, there already happened to be an Erickson Cycles in Seattle, Washington. So our founder, Ken Erickson, you know, had to come up with something else. And like it's like marketing gold. You wouldn't be able to ever create this now with $1 million and 20 people working on something like this. But he happened to, you know, just take that caricature, the alligator, and put him on a bicycle and put that as the logo and just name the brand Moots. So it's a very easily pronounced word. It's very simplistic. It's good across, you know, multiple languages, and everybody knows how it's spelled. And you know, that's kind of how it kicked off when he started offering the bikes to his friends and family, and people were wanting to give him, you know, a couple $100s for these steel custom bikes in the early 80s. That's what he did. He put Moots on there and established the brand. So from 81 to about 87, we were exclusively steel, and pretty much everyone was like really, you know, finding its footing of like, all right, this is a mountain bike, this is a tandem, this is a road bike. 87, we started doing the YBB, the Softail. 89, we started experimenting with titanium. So 89 to 91, we were doing steel and titanium. 91 onward, we really only work with titanium, and kind of that's where our reputation has now been kind of settled in. So started off out of the back of bike shop in Steamboat Springs, moved over to an industrial park about 2 miles away, had half the operation over there, and half of it's still downtown at the bike shop. And then grew out of that and moved into the location that we're currently in 2001. So everything happens there. Under this current location, we're 19 people end to end. And yeah, pretty much busting at the seams now, produce about 4 to 5 bikes a day. Our target is about 1,000 bikes a year. You know, our biggest year has been in history has been just over 1,300. So keep it in perspective, we really just try to run at that rate, and there's no real peak season or low season. It kind of stays consistent. So yeah, a little bit of a story.
Thank you. I should have said at the beginning, by the way, if any of you have questions, if it's a real burning one related to something he's saying in the moment, put your hand up.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end about anything you want to know about the bikes themselves, the brand, or anything like that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
How long have you been with the company?
I came there at 2010, January 2010. Yeah. So whatever that is.
14.
Yeah.
Nate, on that as well, you've talked about the importance of Colorado and the Springs and your founders sort of settling there as well. We're here in London talking about these lovely titanium bikes. What is it, and this is a difficult question, I'm going to throw this at you, but what is it about Steamboat Springs and Colorado that leaves its touch on these bikes wherever they go around the world? What is it about your home location that...
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It probably can go multiple different ways. You know, we're known for our ski resort. Like a lot of people see that, and you know, especially internationally. But what people don't know is we've sent more Olympic athletes out of Steamboat Springs than any other town in the whole United States. So we have this very year-round cardiovascular community. So Nordic skiing in the wintertime, bike riding in the summertime. We have access to amazing national forests. We're on the western slope of the Continental Divide, so the mountains aren't as dramatically harsh like you would see in like the Alps or Pyrenees or Dolomites. So it's a lot more friendly for biking. You know, like we get gradients of 10, 12%, but we don't get gradients of 20 plus. And then all the access and you know, the heritage of mountain biking, like we have so much terrain. You know, we have over 400 miles of single track right out of Steamboat Springs. So you see so many of these kids growing up in this bike friendly community that ride to school, and then they progress on, you know, and they have access to trails, road riding, a lot of good advocacy. It really drives that cycling culture. And then you look at the 19 staff members, you know, there's only a few of them that were born and raised in Steamboat Springs, and a lot of them have kind of sought that out, you know, wanting to pair up, you know, their skill trade of either being a machinist or a welder to a business or a location that can offer that. So it's nice to have a community that really fosters a lot of, you know, recreation, and it allows us to just develop product that we want to ride. So if we had a moniker or a slogan, it would be "Build It, Ride It," and I think that's part of like what the community allows us to do.
You have led me to my next question perfectly. What do you ride then, Nate? When you're at home, it's dry, it's not raining, which is never raining.
Yeah.
What do you ride?
Yeah, currently I've been spending a lot of time on the Moots 33. kind of got that bike in November, and I've been fortunate enough to make a trip over to the Benelux region, down to Austin, Texas. Just got back from Italy. I've probably been spending more time on the Moots 33. The Moots or the Route CRD was probably my bike of choice last year. You know, the integrated, you know, gravel bike. And then, yeah, the Womble, the mountain bike. That's like, I love riding that thing. So fortunately, I'm in a good situation. But yeah.
In case you're not aware, by the way, if you've got a ticket to this event, you've come in here, there's going to be a raffle at the very end, and the winner of the raffle will win the Moots 33 frame set, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
I'm sadly not allowed to enter, which is not too happy about, but you're all involved, and apparently someone's going to get one. So this is quite exciting. Don't go anywhere. It'd be nothing worse than someone having to leave early, and then we find it was there. We know that would be the case. So exciting. Anyway, you talked about the beginnings, Nate, being steel and titanium. I was fascinated to hear you talk there about the soft tail so early as well. I hadn't realised you were talking about, was it early 80s? So just on that, at what point was there that decision to go with titanium and not necessarily drop steel, but to focus on titanium? Because now, as we see, it's very much your speciality, isn't it?
Yeah. So the titanium, you know, in the 80s, it was a very hard material to acquire in a lot of spec variants. It's like it was used for military purposes and in the aerospace industry. So there was 3 mills in the U.S. producing titanium extrusions, and their big contracts were with Boeing for the most part, and defense contracts. So it was really hard to tap into that on a smaller scale to really specify what we would want to use on a bicycle frame. On aerospace, it's a lot of small diameter hydraulic lines, high pressure, high tolerance, but not necessarily a lot of variation. It's like you get this one spec, and that's what you use for there to get this one flow rate. For bicycles, as the sizes increase or the intent changes, we try to tune the ride quality. So we were at a very early stage, we're able to approach a company called Ancotech, who was based out of the central part of the U.S. with Merlin in their early days, to kind of start putting cycling interest on the map. And they, you know, had these downtimes where they would run massive runs for the aerospace industry, and then they'd have a stop. And that stopgap would be to get more input material or to change the foundation of like the setup. And that's where they can incorporate these smaller custom runs to keep the, you know, their operation running. And to know that there was like a desirability for a sporting good there, you know, it really piqued their interest. So we ended up banding together as a smaller group of builders and really developing the interest of having these specific tubes in that late 80s time frame. And then that just kind of snowballed. Then the other mills kind of got on board because then they could figure out how to keep their operations up and running. But the exclusivity of the material wasn't really known by the public. So it, you know, its characteristics of being able to be lighter than steel, it's, you know, resilient, you know, it doesn't rust, you know, it weathers very well. But then its ride characteristics are similar to steel, but they're also a little bit more durable. You know, you buy a titanium bike and they keep them forever because they last. They don't fatigue over time. They don't oxidize over time. And so as we got into that phase in the early 90s of learning how to work with the material and promote the feature benefits as we started uncovering them, that's what led us down that long-term path. It's like, this is here to stay. You know, the bikes are going to last a long time. Why shouldn't we continue to build bikes just solely out of this? So we've been able to kind of develop our process and our strategy to really align with that and just train all our staff to really focus on one thing, do the one thing right.
You talked to us, Nate, about the number of bikes you're aiming to turn out every year. Compared to some really big brands, it's a tiny number. But a tiny number that I can imagine takes an awful lot of work from a very small, dedicated workforce that you've already described. Can you tell us a bit? I mean, we're at Bespoke Cycling, where the customer journey through this place is critical to what they do. And a lot of what they do is aligned with what Moots are doing as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that customer journey as a Moots customer from the first touch point to the first ride?
Yeah, you know, I probably won't hit all the bullet points of the bespoke side of things, just from the first point of view of like what they get to see on the shop floor. But it is such a built to order, built for each individual customer, whether or not it's off the shelf geometry or stock model or a full blown custom. Is we don't really take a lot of, we don't hold inventory. Everything we make is for an order, and like everything has a lead time. So, you know, the customer journey starts off on the Moots end, where we receive an order from our dealer, and in this case being Bespoke Cycles, you know, it tends to be, you know, very specific. They already know what the end bike is going to be. You know, they know what the customer setup's going to be, what their fit numbers are going to be. Like we get a lot of information, and that's perfect. So from there, we're able to kind of take the work order. The Traveler, that's people that know about Moots is famous. We got some back there. It's like the yellow card. And that's like the order for the production guys, the manufacturing staff, and that's initiates like, are we building a gravel bike? Is it a threaded BB? Is it press fit? What's the cable routing? What are the dropouts? You know, what's the head tube length? What's the offset? All that information ends up on there, and that kicks off the process. The process starts off in the miter shop with a CAD drawing, whether it's a stock frame that we've made, you know, 32 times already that year, or it's a one-off custom. Everything starts off with a simple two-dimensional CAD drawing. The miter shop is a smaller group, 2 guys. One guy focuses on the front end of the bike, and one guy focuses on the rear end of the bike, and they'll do a cut week. And so in a cut week is about 20 to 25 bikes.
Do they ever disagree, Nate? You've just described a nightmare scenario
So
to me.
so here's how it works. They start off with the plan of like, these are the 25 bikes we're doing. The guy who's focusing on the head tube, top tube, down tube, you know, he's got his efficiencies of how he's able to pair those 25 together. And the guy who's doing the C stays, chain stays, and C tube, doing the rear end of the bike, he has his efficiencies. So they kind of split ways at the beginning of the week, and they work through that week with setups and processes the best they can. And then by the end of the week, they kind of bring it back together.
Could you recognize a bike if they had a bad week? You know, they've fallen out in some way.
Well, the bike doesn't make it out of the miter shop if it's a bad week. I mean, to be blunt about it, because every front end gets fit up in a jig, and every rear end gets fit up in a jig. And then when they'll sign off on it, it'll get passed on to the welding process. The welding will set up that same jig, and as the miter shop finishes their task off correctly, the tacking area sets up their, you know, similar jig and just drops the tubes into place to all those set dimensions, and then tacks the tubes in place. So like they're physically held together, you know, so then when we do the finish welding, we're able to manipulate the frame around and, you know, do our famous like double pass weld where we fuse the joint first, and then we go back and in a sequence weld the second pass with filler rod and kind of expand the footprint of the weld. And then from there, it'll move on to the finish process where, you know, there's, besides the anodizing, there's a lot of like fancy machining that takes place. Because even though we try to keep everything straight and use heat sinks and purge and have weld sequences, you know, when you add heat and you weld, when you weld a head tube on one side or you weld a bottom bracket on 3 sides, there is deformation that takes place. So like when you weld the head tube here and then you go to press a bearing in there, if you don't machine it post-welding, you won't get that bearing in, or you'll get it in and it'll only be touching here and not here. So when we machine, you know, all the parts that we weld into the frame early on in the CNC area, we leave a little bit more material on there. So once they distort from welding, we can then post-machine them. So Finish has this process with all these tolerances where they'll go through and they'll set up, machine this part, measure, it's in spec, it's out of spec, machine again, get everything in spec, and then fit everything. So they'll fit a bottom bracket, they'll stamp the serial number, they'll check the headset, and then they'll align the frame. So everything goes and gets aligned to make sure the frame's straight. You can take your hands off the handlebars, it's going to continue down the road and not drift or speed wobble on you. And then the actual finish part of finishing takes place where they, you know, make it look pretty and, you know, assemble it to the light end, like with adding, you know, the water bottle bolts and the derailleur hangers and stuff like that. So,
when you look at this, I think probably most of you would agree with me in this room, but I look at that and I say, well, that is what a bicycle should look like, right? It looks like a bicycle, and it just looks right. I'm not just saying that. It just looks spot on. It looks absolutely perfect. What is it, Nate, about I'm just wondering what's happened through the evolution, if we think right back to the early 80s, in not just road, but maybe all-terrain bicycle, stroke gravel, whatever you want to call it, design. Particularly with the fact that carbon bikes are now so cheap, and there's an extremely heavy focus on everything being aero, including aero gravel bikes and all the rest of it. Do you ever find yourself on the start of your customer journey at Moots, where you've got a customer going to you, yeah, but I don't want any cables showing, it's all got to be hidden. I mean, thankfully now with wireless shifting and everything, it's not so much of a problem, but how much sort of crossover do you see between people who've got sort of things that they've loved about their carbon bike, they're suddenly treating themselves to a titanium custom-built bike? Is that difficult to take people on that journey with you? Yeah,
well, it wouldn't be the first time somebody said, this is the bike I have, I want it made out of titanium. And like, you know, it's tough because you got to kind of walk through that with them, right? Like, of like what that actually means. And, you know, we don't really try to hide what we're doing. You know, we leave all our welds shown. We don't try to polish anything. We don't really manipulate the tubes any, because they actually work better in the shape that they're in than if we hydroform them or we manipulate them to match an aesthetic of a composite frame. So like leaving things in the structural manner is kind of like what we have established is like, it's the no BS. Like if it's there, it has a purpose. Like again, we're building it the way that we want it to ride. And like it's not going to get better if we just make it appear to look different. But it has created, and it's not marketing, there is some truth, but it has created a lot of like hype in people's heads of like, oh, the tube's round. This is like a bike from the 60s. Well, it's like, well, yeah, but I mean, you could lose a few pounds too, or drop a water bottle, and like it all balances out. But like you can't get down the brass tacks. You really just have to stick to why we do it the way we do. And you know, like the integrity of the tubing, it diminishes the more that you start manipulating it. And like a great example is like in the chainstays, you'll see some of these bikes of ours, like we do squish these chainstays right around where the chain ring and the tire is. And it's important because we're trying to maximize clearance there. But if you look at it, it will flex this way, like laterally, but it won't flex vertically because the way the shape is. So there's some parts that like, do get squished, like this right here, this tube and this tube are effectively the same diameter. So we squish this tube to meet so it doesn't completely wrap all the way around the side and interfere. But it's not as dramatic as like, say, that bike on the wall where there's a lot of shape. And like, you get down to that and you're like, okay, well, what do we need so much of that shape for? So we prioritize comfort and build quality or ride quality over like these, only out on the pinnacle end of the spectrum, you're getting this advantage. So.
Can I ask you a question first? Well, I'm just thinking on that, and then I promise we'll come to you. How close are you? The fact that you've not got this overly heavy focus, you're keeping true to the tubing rather than worrying about aero profiling. How close are you then to having, have you got a model that you would think of as being your do-it-all bike? Something that will take a decent width tire that you can swap the wheels in and out. I'd say that like the Route 45 for us has kind of been that over the years. It's effectively a gravel bike. It can fit fenders, racks, decent gearing. So like you could put a slicker tire on there and still go out on good road rides. But like people bike pack with it. People, gravel race with it. People, if they're going to buy one Moots, that's typically it. It's in the middle of the spectrum. But like this Moots 33, it's a little bit more acquaintable to people in the sense that like it could fit a larger tire, 36, 38C. It's still got road gearing, road geometry, so it's less of a departure than what they might have come off of. Yeah. But yeah, somewhere in that range, that like kind of Route 45 has been our big, do it all. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Talking about the seat stays, is that very different on the 33?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question.
Would you go drop seat stays? Do they matter?
Yeah, so we don't really believe in the drop seat stay, and I'll tell you why. Like the drop seat stay on like the monocoque carbon frames of like where they really got big, it's because those frames are so stiff. Like how that construction is, they're so stiff. So they're looking to try to minimize that and try to get a little bit more flex out of the seat post range. For us, a lot of people notice this small weld here on the seat tube. that's an insert. We actually machine that part. It's a little thicker wall than the seat tube itself, and we press it in, and then we've created a more or less a robotic welder. It's very simplistic, but like it's a homemade robotic welder. But it allows us to continually rotate that tube and weld it at the same pulse rate to just get a nice fusion weld. So we create that basically a butted tube for a thicker wall here to reinforce for where the seat post is, so we can machine it back out, but also keep the seat tube really light. And then same with the head tube, same with the bottom bracket, same with the dropouts. They're all thicker wall pieces than where the tube itself meets. So we always try to weld a thin wall tube to a thick wall tube in every joint, so that way we could put all the heat in the thicker wall piece and kind of draw the smaller one in. So if we drop the seat stays, we'd be down here in the thinner wall piece. And again, we feel we're getting more flex and compliance out of the seat post than the seat tube. In the other aspect of the seat stays, like the Route 45 and the Route CRD, the wishbone seat stay, because this one comes up a lot, rather than the fastback. So we really established that wishbone seat stay style in '87 when we did the YBB, and that's the soft tail. So that's where it housed all the suspension components in there. So in '87 we were doing cantilever brakes, and all through the '90s cantilever and V brakes. So the brake posts had to be in the same spots to like spacing wise, not only height wise but spacing wise. So when we were doing soft tails and hard tails, it was an option. The customer would say, "Oh, I want a rigid bike. Oh, I want a soft tail bike." But the geometry was the same. The front end was the same. We were just changing out the chain stays and the seat stays. But the spacing for the brake posts needed to be the same. So we were making basically a rigid seat stay kit at the same time as we were making that soft tail one. So the YBB really established that wishbone seat stay look that we've had and become really known for. So we've kept it on our gravel bikes, and kind of like, you could tell a Moots, like when it rides by and you see that wishbone seat stay, that's a Moots. So that's kind of been a legacy thing. It really helps out with a lot of our production setups, because over the years we've really honed in on how to make that seat stay kit efficiently and consistently, both in the soft tail and in the hard tail. But yeah, they're kind of our two things. We were just talking about this briefly earlier on, but like we're tending to default to more of a classic aesthetic with the double triangle. The rounder tubes, a little less slope in the top tube and no drop in the seat stays. And our aesthetic point is like the seat stays, like this bike was sitting horizontal, the seat stays have always tried to meet that midpoint of the top tube, so it has that nice transition.
That's been like a signature of builders, back in the days, still, the way the seat cluster was
Yep.
a signature.
Yep.
Would you envision doing a 3D printing for the seat cluster, or would that not be technically?
We've discussed different spots to do 3D printed parts into the bike, and we've I wouldn't say we've tried, like we've definitely pursued it. 3D printing adds a lot of cost of goods to the product, and being able to, how we handle this now, we know what we get into, we know how the process works, and we don't, like 3D printing, it's not always the best, like that, it's actually heavier there when we made that cluster. So you see a lot of people 3D printing right now, and then they're bonding composite joints to there, where they're doing like a composite top tube or composite seat stay. But for us, being able to weld into that, we're able to kind of keep the material cost to within reason and actually create a better riding, because that 3D printed lug would end up being pretty heavy. So if we're going to use it, it's likely not going to happen there.
Your 3D printed dropouts, they're done in-house, or do you buy them in?
No, I pulled this out because I knew this would get asked.
I was having I've seen it.
Yeah. No, so we engineer them in-house. The 3D printing, we actually started that in 2014 here in the UK. It was like when flat mount disc brakes came to market, or when they were coming to market, that was where it started for us. Knowing that we were going to have to put those two brake posts closer to the dropout in the tubing and having to pierce the tube to weld that in, it was going to create a lot of unpredictability in distortion of where that alignment of the dropout would go and real alignment. So it was a big concern of ours. So we started working in 2014 with a company here in the UK with developing this and like understanding the engineering. And where we're at now, I mean, I've taken this journey from start to finish, and like where we started out, we all have a fabrication machinist background at Moots at this time. And so like we were designing these parts that basically in our heads were, how do we make this? How do we reduce the material and make it into this? So they were like very I-beam structure. And like these guys had no idea about bike building that we were working with. And like they're additive engineers. And so they're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like we're not optimizing the technology. So over the course of like a year and a half, we really got on like back and forth, and got on the same page. And they really helped us get off the ground. 2016, we brought the product to market on a disc RSL frame, then the route RSL frame. And now we're like 12 editions in, but we print all domestically. We have one in Denver, one in Indianapolis, and one in Bend, Oregon now. And the reason we have 3 is to kind of control costs, so one doesn't exploit you, and also to kind of survive through like, you know, lead times, deliveries, the pandemic. Everybody got a little unpredictable, or you know, they get a defense contract or prototyping, and you know, you get set back for 6 months. So just some sustainability of holding them accountable to meet the spec. But yeah, we've looked into it. We can't technically do it in our building that we're in now. It's very sensitive to vibrations. And like with all our equipment that we currently have, we would need to actually pour a separate pad and expand our building. But we don't have the space on our lot. And then it's a huge investment cost that we just don't think that we would basically be starting an independent business to keep that occupied. We wouldn't keep it busy enough with just our product.
I noticed that the right-hand one is hollow, and the left-hand one has got sort of ribs in it.
Yeah, it depends what era you looked at. Yeah, there's an older one over there. There's all of them now, for the most part, have what we call the macaroni in it, because it's basically a geometric shape. It's a geometric lattice that goes through the inside. So when we print these parts, they basically lay down a bed of titanium powder, and a laser above fuses that powder, and it slowly stacks up. But heat builds up just like if we were welding. So before, when we were building them hollow, we were having to put either a thicker wall, like a thicker exterior wall, and support structures, like kind of like a vertical beam, to keep everything in alignment. So as it printed, it didn't pull one way, and then you get like a shift in the print. So this geometric shape, the macaroni on the inside, it creates a support structure on the inside. So we're able to print a thinner wall on the exterior. We actually use less material in the end because there's not as much waste, but it has a denser inside. So now they have that kind of noodly shape, and like the drive side one has a port that goes through it that's perforated, so gas, argon can flow through there for the welding, and also like a Di2 wire. But for the most part, yeah, they've evolved. We were printing them hollow, and now as the softwares and technology of engineering with additive manufacturing has evolved, we've been able to kind of catch on to some of that advancement and improve them over time. But like it's like when we get them back from the 3D printer, they're not done. Like a lot of this stuff we have to post print machine, you know, like the axle, the hub pocket, just to get all those faces and diameters out to size and perpendicular. So there is a little bit of machine work that we do to these when we get them back. It's somewhat of a raw material. And then, yeah, we have to fit them all for each bike that they're going in, so there's a good interface for welding and fusing.
Nate, it's an extraordinarily detailed process, and by the sound of it, understandably, you've got very detailed and quite discerning customers who expect certain things of you as well. One of the things that I suspect probably wasn't as high on your list of priorities back in the 80s is sustainability and the carbon footprint, the green element of what you're doing. How important is that to Moots now, and how do you negotiate that when you've got such attention to detail on quite a small scale of production?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a huge deal. I mean, I wouldn't say we're a group of hippies, but like, I mean, more or less this is a little bit of a tangent as well. Our tubing comes in 20-foot lengths in these plywood boxes, and like we have to pay for the box to get it, but you know, what do you do with a 20-foot long plywood box after you get, you know, 20, 30 of them a year? So we started cutting them up and turning them into like planter boxes, and we built this garden out the back of Moots that we were going organic, and we were going to feed ourselves for years, but then we realized that nothing grows in Colorado because it's winter 6 months of the year. But for the most part, like, we were always trying something. And I think this is where I'm going with this is like sustainability kind of comes out, and everybody really thinks about like what the energy, what the CO2 or emissions, what like the recyclability, all those things like come to the top of the mind right away. And there's a lot more that goes into that. And I was speaking to somebody earlier here tonight, and telling them a little bit about our crew. Like, we're all within 6 miles of the factory. It's a small town. For the most part, everybody rides their bike to work. Like, we foster that. We incentivize people. Like, every day you ride, we have employee accounts. I don't know how much I want to say since this is being recorded, but like, we have employee accounts, and for every day that you ride, we put cash on their account that they can use to buy bike parts and like, all the things that cyclists end up buying throughout the year. And so like, everybody is motivated to ride, and starts becoming a competition. I think that kind of goes a long way. All our product is US sourced. Like, we source the dropouts, like those printed parts within the US. We machine a lot of stuff in-house out of raw materials that come from locations in the U.S. All our tubing, comes from the U.S. So, and the same when we go to build and source our bikes, we take a lot of that in consideration, like a lot of our parts and our sourcing. And then our outbound, like what makes it over here, I was saying to Dan and Rowan earlier when we were at breakfast, is that, the UK has been one of our first partners that have been really stringent on the packaging for exporting, and like, we have to be very detailed of like what we're using in the packaging and why we're using and what the volumes are. So outside of those matters, there's a lot that goes into it. Everything that all of our waste materials, like we get 20-foot lengths of tubing in some cases, and you don't ever always get it right, so you're left with 2 inches. Sometimes you're left with like 6 to 8. You can't use that for a top tube, or all that gets recycled, or it gets turned into a stem. Or another small part that we'll use. All of our chips, all of our turnings, we extract all the coolants out of them. We use all organic oils in our coolants, so they're recyclable as we drain them out, so we can continue to reuse them. We got, I think it was for 11 years, we were the largest small business west of the Continental Divide in Colorado that had an offset of solar energy. Our whole roof is all solar built, and we got passed by the electric company down the road, like literally out the window from us, with a bigger establishment. But it is a big deal, because like, when you think about it, we're producing everything from start to finish and creating that product and distributing from there. And not in any disregard, but when we take sustainability into mind, a lot of stuff gets sourced from so far away that the biggest impact is the transportation till it lands to where it's at. And I don't want to sound hypocritical, because like, we're here in the UK and we flew over with bikes, but when people are shipping containers of bikes overseas and around the world, it's a lot different than when we're starting out with a ingredient list and constructing everything under one roof from start to finish.
Yeah. Nate, I noticed something when we came in here. There was lots of nice bikes to look at, mostly Moots. There's some fine looking S-Works frames hanging up there. One of the big differences between them and this is that no one's touching them. You probably could, but a lot of people came in here and did that, including me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about the finish? Why is it like? And I'm intrigued to know this, because this is quite. It's a very titanium-like finish.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of coating on it at all? How close is it to bare metal?
Yeah.
And then finally, the question I know a lot of people want to ask, because people have asked me and I haven't got a Scooby-Doo, which is why I'm asking you.
Yeah.
How on earth do you do that?
Yeah.
Because it's smooth. There's not a single join there at all.
Yeah. So this is more or less raw titanium. The only thing that we put on this is like a furniture polish, like just a aerosol wax. And all that does, like a pledge wax is what we call it in America, like a lemon scented, aerosol wax. And all that does is just stops like your oily handprints and stuff. Okay. It just keeps it more or less clean. So other than that, this is how the frames are built, and then we bead blast them. We use a glass bead. It's like really fine in your hand, almost feels like a flower in your hand, and it's a pressurized blast cabinet that we, at about 60 psi, we peen the material. So the little balls of glass like kind of go in and they'll hit the metal, and it's more than just the finish. We found that it stress relieves the metal. So all the energy that's built up in, you know, the heat from the welding that's pulling the tubes this way, or when we cold set and we align everything, you know, there's a lot of energy and inertia built up in the tubes, whether it's twists or pulling. So to hit everything and just basically relax it, it allows it to secure and set there. So it gives us this nice uniform aesthetic from, you know, the machine material, the raw extruded material, and the weld to make it real nice and uniform in the printed parts. But it also serves a mechanical purpose to really like kind of set that alignment in place. And yeah, it's highly serviceable, right? Like, you know, you can clean your bike, you can put a little furniture polish on it, it's nice and clean. It's just as durable as the material itself, so it's got a lot of integrity that goes on. You see them, people that'll do like a 3-month bike packing tour, and they'll have bags on it, and they'll have a little bit of chafing or polishing, and all that's done is just kind of smooth the surface from the bee blast, but it hasn't damaged the material like your said S-Works.
Yeah.
But
what about these colors then?
yeah,
Because I'm intrigued.
so
how's that work?
So the unique thing about titanium and nibdium, they're the two metals, alloys that you can actually oxidize and produce color that we can see with our eyes. So if you think about like steel or iron, you know, it'll rust and get like that orangey color, rust color, or copper will patina and it'll get the green color. We're able to kind of create these colors in the prismatic spectrum by electrolysis. So what we'll do is kind of prep the material with like a surface etching. Like it's a chemical treatment, but it's, you know, it's not like, you know, we do it with just gloves on. It's very minimal impact, and it basically takes the grains of, like, titanium is a bunch of particulates, a bunch of grains all bonded together, and the etching, what it does is like the hairs on your arm, or at least on my arm, like they're going in every direction, and the etching basically stands everything up in a uniform manner, so that the grain structure on the surface is all going to oxidize at the same rate. If you just did an extruder tube and you went across it, you get a little blotchiness, because the voltage is very sensitive. It starts out about like 12.5 volts all the way up to 90 volts, and it's by the 10th of a volt. So every time you increase the voltage, the color will change, like what the surface oxidation is. So what we're able to do is we're able to kind of control the colors we want with oxidizing with the electrolysis, and then also masking the material with a vinyl mask from a plotter, and then bee blasting or layering different colors. Like this one here, the Stanley, and that Apex finish, they're very, you know, much of fade. But like if you look at behind Rowan on the door, the stick, all the different colors, like that's kind of the voltage range. Like down at the bottom, the brown is a lower voltage, and up to the green is the higher voltage, and it kind of scales up. So if you have a higher voltage color, you can't go over it with a lower voltage. So if you see some of our other finishes, you'll see those really sharp lines of color next to color, and it's likely we did the higher voltage color next to a vinyl mask. We peeled the vinyl mask off and did the lower voltage color and left that sharper line. So all these things that our guys at Finish are super creative with this. They do graphic designs in like Illustrator, and they'll create these like paint by number, more or less, plotting processes, and they'll put these vinyl masks on there, and they'll anodize, bee blast, polish, anodize, bee blast, and they start weeding it and peeling it off, and it starts really coming to life. But like something like this here, we'll sand this down tube, and we'll anodize this whole thing. Like it'll be pink here to green all the way around, just one big splotch of color, and we'll vinyl plot the Moots logo, lay that down on there, and then we'll bee blast over it. And you know, the bee blast won't penetrate the vinyl. You peel back the vinyl and you're left with that underlying color. So it's been a really great way to kind of enhance the product from where we used to be with just decals. That's super unique to just this material. And then, like, you know, you have the same durability of material with the color. Like it's microns thick, the oxidation. It was actually developed within the Navy as a coating when they were making some stuff for the fighter jets. They were trying to coat the fuselages on the side, and they wanted them to become more stealth, so they weren't as reflective because the titanium was very reflective. So they figured out how to do it, and they were only able to kind of create some of those lower brown colors. And now it's really been developed more and more of like how the full range is, and we're just fortunate that we've been able to figure out how to work with it and capitalize.
Yeah. Nate, you just made me think of something. You're talking about whole aircraft being built out of titanium, and then you can start to understand why they're as expensive as they are, these aircraft. But you also got me thinking, we talked about sustainability. What is the long-term sustainability of the source of metal? The good thing is these frames last an awfully long time, but I'm just starting to worry there might not be enough titanium left in the world. Where's it coming from, and how much of...
Yeah, but before we get there, I think that touches on that good thing. Like I'm looking behind you guys at this single speed one back in the back. So we made that bike a lot earlier than before we started anodizing frames, and that frame came back to get touched up and get those logos added. And that is one thing about a metal, like our metal frames, is we're able to refurbish them, we call them. So people will go out on those said bike packing and get the chafing, or we'll come out with a new fancy finish and they get excited and want to add new parts. But we get people that'll send their bikes back after a year or after 13 years for a refinish, and we're able to kind of strip back all the grease and grime, you know, re-bead blast them, clean any little scuffs, dings up, and then add a new finish. And it literally will leave the factory side by side with a brand new frame. And you could tell it's a used frame when you get up close to it, but from 30, 40 feet away, it's remarkable that like how good they look. And I think that does go, like, parts evolve, people evolve over time, but being able to kind of continue to give back really goes a long way.
I'm getting very close to handing over to you lot for some questions, so please do think of some good ones. I'm sure you'll have some already. But from me, Nate, what's next? Because we can see, we look at that frame back there, we can see kind of the lineage between that and then adding the disc brakes and then wireless shifting and all the rest of it. What's next? Where are we going next?
Yeah, it's always a good question, because I always feel like we just have achieved a lot to look about what we're coming to next. Like the 3D printing, even though it's about a decade old for us now, it seems like that was a big hurdle. The integration in the bikes, that was a big hurdle. But yeah, the one really unique thing about Moots is like we have a lot of skilled people there. Everybody is like the welders, all they do is weld. The machinists, all they do is machine. But there's not like walls in between. They're always able to interact and communicate, and everybody's really close. And the true core is everybody's ended up there because they want to ride bikes, and they want to kind of put their craft to riding the bike. So everybody is out and about riding bikes, thinking about things, pressing his buttons, talking to her about doing this, and like it's naturally it just evolves development wise. But I think right now we're happy to launch that Moots 33 in what we are calling it as the Prologue build, and the Route 45 behind it, and that's more or less to get these two bikes at a $7,500 price point. And our big goal here is in the next 2 months is to get like a mountain bike at a Prologue pricing, and then from there we're looking to introduce a mountain bike here at Sea Otter that's going to be more of an XC marathon bike, so 100 mil travel, little bit smaller tire than what our Womble Mountaineer has, 29 by 2.4, 38 tooth chainring capacity, more built for the lightness, the speed, the less techie riding. And then, our guys, for the most part are more and more mountain bikers than anything. So I think there's always this constant pursuit of what to do next. And everybody's always like full suspension. So we're always trying and picking away at those projects. But we won't bring something to market until we're really confident that it's what we want.
Yeah. Nate, you mentioned Sea Otter. That's one of probably the oldest mountain bike events in the world, surely. Where's the balance then between, sorry, I know I said, this is one more question, promise. Where's the balance between people seeking the ultimate ride and then racing as well? Because you're talking about supplying bikes to people who are racing at Sea Otter. Yeah. Where's the balance between those two, and where's the point at which you have to go, actually, our real customer base want to enjoy their weekend ride on an incredibly bespoke bicycle. Yeah. And then the racers are saying, no, but we need it more aero. It's too comfortable. I don't want it to be comfortable. I just want it to be fast. Yeah. Comfortable, fast. How do you balance that?
Yes, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, because what was the saying? Something like from the race car days. Like, Dan, you might know this. You win on Sunday, sell
Wake it up, just wake it up.
win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Like I think is how so many people have like really established the pedigree of their brand.
Yeah.
So like there's this aspiration of all things with sport to always admire and aspire to be at the highest level. But as you mentioned, that's not for everybody, right? Like, you know, you can always just enjoy the spectacle and then you have your hobby. So our lineup has gotten a bit dense in that regard. You know, the Route 45 and the Route CRD are two completely different bikes. Like that's a fully integrated bike by the surface, but it's also geometry-wise, it's completely different. Like it's got a lot different riding position than a Route 45. That's the person that wants to be a little more stretched out, wants to be a little more road racy, gravel riding. That's like, I want to be more comfortable upright back angle. And then the same thing goes with the tubing there. Like we're making some compromises on the tubing there to put stiffness where you know, put the power into the bike on the lower end, you know, and add some compliance in the top end. Whereas on the Route 45, you know, we're trying to make the bike a comfortable riding bike. So it is a hybrid, and we've balanced that gap by trying to create some models. You know, one model's not good for everybody. So we're just trying to, you know, build out here and here in each direction in that intended use.
Who's got some good questions for us? I know there are, because some people have said so. Yeah, go on, go for it.
Tell us more about how customizable everything is. As in, like, you can go from just buying an off-the-shelf frame to, like, how far can you go? Like, what can you do?
Yeah. So, you know, we have road, gravel, mountain, and then we have the different models in each of those categories. The Moots CRD, the Moots 33, the Moots RCS. They're the models in those categories. And we use those as the baseline, the starting point. Like each of those are unique. One's a little more racy, one's a little bit more all around. And typically that's where somebody will start. You know, they're not going to want this and this, you know, or they like something about this, but they're this customer. So that intended use or intended direction is our baseline. But then from there, like this is a perfect setting right now, like what takes place here in Bespoke with all their fit. Has anybody here done a fit with Bespoke in the past? So like, I mean, it's a pretty thorough, extensive process to be able to walk through that and like, you know, have somebody there adjust your positioning, tell you why and what the effect is going to be. When they move you around on these fit cycles, you know, and gather the data and collect the information, it's moving all your contact points. It's moving where your hand position is, where your back angle is, where your saddle position is fore and aft, where your seat angle is likely going to be. You're on this apparatus, if you guys haven't seen it yet tonight, that has very minimal similarities to what the M bike looks like. All those dimensions of where they put you to get you in that efficient, comfortable position, we're able to take that and adjust things on the frame. So to answer that question, we're able to increase the head tube length and maybe move the handlebars up, change the head tube angle, you know, drop the seat tube length so that you have the right amount of seat posts, change the bottom bracket drop, but pretty much move everything around, but still keep that intended use there. Because custom is intimidating in a lot of ways, because just with the frame itself, it could be endless. You know, you could be on this path of like your direction, you want to be having like a gravel all-around bike, and your fit, you know, puts you in a more roady position on that gravel bike than what the gravel bike started out with. And that could ultimately lead that you're not on a gravel bike in the end, because the customization process just moves you back to an all-road road bike. And then the custom process for us just doesn't stop with adjusting the geometry. You know, we have 12 different butted tubes that we use on the road and gravel bikes, and 35 straight gauge tubes that we use on the gravel and road bikes. And so what that allows us to do is tune the ride. So once we know a little bit more about who the rider is, if it's a male, if it's a female, if they have flexibility issues, if they can create a lot of power, if they're lighter or heavier than what you would generalize based on their size, we're able to tune the ride based on that input and data around that geometry. So basically hand select the tubes that we're going to use on that bike for them. And then from there, either the shop or the customer, you know, has the finished customization, all the different parts pairing of building like a boutique bike. You know, like you're able to kind of build the wheels to your liking. You're able to select the handlebars, the anodized Chris King parts. You match the saddle, the seat post. Like, so the customization part for us starts out at the very beginning, and then all the way to the end, it's kind of the sky's the limit. Yeah, to some extent. You're sitting too close to Hector. Yeah. Yeah, but like again, like if you look like, yeah, if you look back there, I talked to somebody earlier, and he's like, I'm coming up on a very special birthday, and this is my gift to myself. And he wanted to commemorate that birthday, and we were like standing right back there where Dan's at, and I was like this, like right here, you know, we can put that date right here on your top tube, you know, so you can see it. And he goes, you can do that? And I was like, yeah, no problem. Let's just make sure we get do you want day, month, year, or you want month, day, year? Like, let's just make sure we're getting it right. But yeah.
Go for it.
I don't know if I missed it earlier when I popped downstairs, but we were talking about how many bikes produced per week, per year, and so on.
Yeah.
What's the actual turnaround time for delivery from receiving your yellow slip
Yeah.
order to finishing production and shipping it out?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so typically we've like always hovered around 8 weeks. You know, we started doing more of these printed part bikes and the anodization bikes, and it kind of ballooned out to 10 to 12 weeks on like the worst case scenarios. Obviously, the pandemic set us all back. Like our backlog went from, you know, 150 to 250 average in the order queue out to 700 in over a 2.5 year period, and like that was adding staff and improving efficiencies and slimming down our lineup. At our current rate, we've you know gotten to this point of that we're able to do things in more of an effective manner, and we've been able to kind of take some of our profitability over the past 3 years and invest that capital back into putting stock material on the shelf. So we're able to kind of cut some stuff, weld some stuff, and get it a little further on because like we've just been able to purchase more material and dedicate that to future sales. So some of our lead times are as low as 4 weeks. Like a 56 Route 45, it's probably 4 weeks, just knowing that we make, you know, 60, 80 of those a year. And then like some of the like, you know, extra large Mountaineer, one that will make 3 to 5 a year. That one's probably going to be 8 to 10 weeks. But yeah, that's kind of when we get the order, everything's confirmed, kind of start to finish. And yeah, like we're usually pretty effective on that. And then everything's in the transportation hands from that point. But yeah, that's what we always like. That's one of our KPIs is 8 weeks, and like we really always try to keep everything under 8 weeks.
You're talking about sustainability, how long the bikes last. The customer can send it back and have it refreshed. Is that just an aesthetic? Or are you able to come back and make mechanical changes?
Yeah, so that's another good question. It's less common now that we make many mechanical changes. You know, when we were moving from cantilever brakes in the quick release era to hydraulic brakes, we were able to like add cable routing for through guide of a hydraulic brake and a brake tab and things like that. With through axle dropouts, they're less alterable. You can't manipulate them as much. Printed parts similar. Like we try not to do anything where we're having to cut stuff off and put new stuff back on. But with that being said, you know, it's not always like that. We can add fender mounts, rack mounts. You know, we can add a third water bottle cage. We can add like some of the smaller details to kind of improve to those things. Another thing that kind of goes into our refurb is like just like a check. Like everything has to go through a tolerance check when it comes back. We look at, oh, this one's got a little chain suck. Let's clean those marks and that scarring up there. Let's put everything on the alignment table. Let's just make sure all the alignment still checks out. Headset diameters, you know, does everything still measure the spec there? C-post, does everything look good there? So it's just like a good refresh reassurance there. You know, it's like a Mercedes certified pre-owned inspection, right? But the aspect of like, yeah, how much can we manipulate them? Not a ton, because like we want to keep them as good as they can be. I know that like other brands, they'll offer to like cut the frames in half and add couplers. We don't advise that, but like other people do things like that, but like we kind of try to stay away. But with that being said, last year we tried to introduce, because it does come up, where people are like, well, I have this bike and I thought it was going to be the last Moots. Now the parts have changed. And now I can't adapt my Moots RSL rim brake bike to be a disc RSL through axle bike. So we're offering people a trade-in, you know, whether it's they're the original owner, they bought the bike secondhand. As long as the bike is intact, we'll take the Moots frame back and apply a seg credit to a new purchase. Because it's just like, we don't want to lose the customer because like it's not something that we can do, but we want to kind of help meet that expectation. And like, it doesn't, you know, not a lot of people want to give up their Moots, you know, but like I think that does add a little bit of value of uniqueness because, you know, just the S-Works back there, they're not disposable. They're very high quality and nice bikes, and they'll probably have a lot of them will probably have 3 owners in their lifetime, and like they'll still be great bikes in the end. But people don't look at carbon composite bikes the same way as they look at metal bikes. People look at metal bikes as they're going to last forever, and that's like something that's really hard to extract out of somebody when they get to that crossroads where they're like, wait a second, I can't change this now, and you're like, unfortunately, it's just too catastrophic to make that change. So we're trying to figure out a way to really work with those small amount of customers to bridge that gap and make sure that they really stay involved in the brand. And it's, you know, it is a little nice thing that we can do because we're small enough that we can work directly with people.
Hey, can I just chip in one question on that, the titanium carbon thing?
Yeah.
I doubt there's very many of these frames still around. I don't know if anyone's got one, but I can remember racing on an aluminium mainframe, carbon rear end, carbon fork. Where have you guys gone with the integration of carbon? I'm presuming most of your bikes have got a carbon fork with a carbon steerer, right?
Yeah.
Carbon seat post most of the time, but you've got some tie seat posts as well, right?
Yeah.
But did you ever go through a process of adding carbon to the rear end?
Now,
what's your thoughts on that?
We haven't. We're not against it in the aspect. We've actually kind of tinkered around with a little bit of like seat mass introduction of carbon seat mass. You know, it's titanium and carbon actually work really well together. They have like pretty much the same thermal expansion rate. So like you'll see on like the higher quality carbon frames, they'll have titanium dropouts, like or at least the older non-monocoque style, where the seat stays or chain stays meet a machine piece. It'll be a titanium piece because of the thermal expansion rate. So that bond that you're able to get there, they don't move any differently. Whereas if you have aluminum dropout, like Trek had some fork tips for 3 years that all got recalled, where they all got loosed because the bond and the thermal expansion changed. So titanium and carbon actually work really well together, and people do that because they're able to kind of add either stiffness there, or affect costs, or increase the efficiency of productivity. But it's hard to say that is one way better or not.
How on earth do you join it? That's what I don't understand, is how you join titanium and carbon.
Epoxy.
Right. Just glue. And I presume that adds weight to it as well.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's really just like a bonding agent. That's the only way you do it. Yeah. And usually it's like a labyrinth seal style where, either the titanium has, an internal diameter and an external diameter, and the composite slides in between the two layers so it bonds on the inside and the outside. That's probably the best way to do it. There's every way under the sun that it's done, but I think for us, like, it's always kind of been that all metal all the time kind of attitude, and like we know a lot more about the titanium than we do about the composite material. So
And then if you were to anti-mast, right, carbon, so then you would lose some weight.
Nah, maybe.
Maybe, but would you gain some stiffness?
Yeah.
Pedaling is bonded to it, because is the seat tube the thing that gives you the stiffness from the pedaling?
Yeah, at the bottom bracket, the bottom bracket, C-tube, down tube, chainstay cluster, that whole area, and that's probably the biggest thing, is how you bond that seat mass carbon C-tube to the bottom bracket. Really is probably the hardest thing of the whole assembly, because it's easy on the top, you're just piercing through it, right? And like, you want a little compliance there, and the frame moves around there, but down at the bottom, you're ending. So it's literally coming into a butt. So like, how much are you going to be able to hold, and how much is that going to hold over time? Like, that's the epoxy, the resin epoxy in the material and the resin epoxy used to bond to the titanium. They're going to have different fatigue lives, and it's going to fatigue differently from a 5 foot tall female to a 6'2" tall male. And that's just the thing that we've never really been able to get super confident with to really push that forward. And like the seat mask thing, it starts creating like a lot of complexities too in a lot of other ways. So we're pretty happy with our seat post design. You know, like we really like doing that. The 27.2, we actually get that material specifically made for us. It's a 1 inch 70 thousandths outside diameter plus 0 thousandths minus 3 thousandths. So it's a super high tolerance tube with a 40 thousandths wall or 1 millimeter wall thickness. And the partner that we've had for, you know, almost 3 decades now that do it, they stop what they're doing and they make that post material extrusion specifically for the bike seat tube. And it's got like such a tight tolerance that there's a lot of yield material in that. But I think that we know how that ride is, and like that's the thing with the seat mass is like if you extend it, you know, further past the top tube, it's going to flex more. If you extend it less, it's going to flex less. So it's just like the ride characteristic. It's really hard to relate to, and it kind of creates a little bit of a dead end in a lot of cases.
Can I get back to this gentleman here who interrupted? Sorry.
So you were talking about the lifetime frame and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How repairable? In heaven, did you have a massive stack? Repairable is titanium.
Yep.
Sure. Everything around you is gonna like be smashed to bits. And
Yeah.
Moots frame is just gonna be sitting there. But heaven forbid it wasn't. How repairable?
You want to know what titanium frames aren't good against? Is when you leave them on the roof of your car and you drive them into the garage door. No offense, but we've seen a number of those that like the bike rack actually beats the bike. But yeah, that's a great question. So first and foremost, we're lifetime warranty. So if we can't repair it, we'll replace it. And in a lot of cases, we are able to kind of do different things to repair them. And so some things just over time, like wear out. Like we got one in, I want to say, last August or September. And the guy's like, hey, I noticed I had a hole in my chainstay. And like when you see this in an email, you're like, oh, what the hell does this mean? And so we asked for photos, and then like we saw the photos, we're like, okay, you just noticed you had a hole in your chainstay? Like, I mean, out of like a 1 inch vertical, 3/4 of it was missing from like where the tire had ran through it for probably 1,000 miles. And it's like, okay, we can't replace that, or we can't repair that. Like there's too much material missing, but we can replace it. And then like on an occasional case where somebody will hit, you know, a pothole, you know, blindly, and it'll get that hard impact on the fork, and it'll really load up the down tube or like the top tube at the head tube, and it'll start like a crack right in the center of the weld. We're able to repair things like that. We're able to kind of take the crack in the weld, drill it out at both ends, grind it down, clean it, weld a fusion pass, and then weld back over top of it and kind of just repair it in those cases. But like dents are really hard in titanium because it doesn't spring back like steel. Steel, you can kind of massage the dent out. Titanium was a lot more resilient. So like if somebody drops something and it puts a little compression indent, it's really hard to get those out. But anything like alignment-wise or stress-wise, we usually can repair or replace. But they're not bulletproof. You know, like we are working on that fine cusp of ride quality and material limitations. So like you kind of take that over, you know, lifetime, like this will go through a brick wall mindset.
Did anyone else find it interesting, unusual, when it really struck me, Nate, when you said something about when we get out of the box before we start making the frame, so you talked about, was it a de-stressing process? Yeah. Of de-stressing the metal? Yeah. And it kind of has like can you explain that a little bit more what you mean by that? Because from a yeah, I mean it's a strange thing, right? Like I mean, like in the human body, like it's like if you go do like 50 pull-ups a day. I don't know. I don't do pull-ups. Like what's a good example? 20 pull-ups a day. Like if you continue to do that over and over, you're gonna get really tight. You're gonna want to kind of stretch and like get muscle relaxation and like bring it back to like a set place. And that's kind of what takes place with the metal, right? Like we're pushing and like pulling it with the welding. So we're like kind of, we're making this product go to where we want it to go. But like when you think about how a tube gets extruded, and I'll just go down that path. So, the tube starts out as like basically a piece of ingot material, and it gets extruded to a thicker wall piece and then goes through and through and through and gets stretched out and thinned out and thinned out.
when it goes through this extrusion, it twists. Like it has a helical process. Like it gets drawn through and it kind of twists through. And so that the grains of that metal from one end of the tube and from one tube to the next, they're not always exactly the same. Like sometimes they roll this way, sometimes they roll that way. So there's this energy built up from how everything lays and goes each way. And so when you weld it and you put heat into it, the one, you could do it exactly the same. The one will move this way, and you weld the next one and it'll move more this way. So like it just naturally moves back to the way that the material has been produced. And so we have all this stuff fighting us in every which way throughout the process. And when we get to the end, we're going through and doing an alignment check, and we're basically cold setting it where titanium is very resilient to moving. So that's why the ride gives it that nice springy feel, but also very compliant because it always wants to come back to where it goes. So like when we bend, you know, those wishbone C-stays, that arc, we have to bend it way further than where it finishes, because when you take the pressure off, it comes back. So same thing goes when we go to do an alignment in the end of the manufacturing process. Like we're checking them across 14 inches, like for example, the twist of the head tube, to be within 5/1000ths of an inch. And like, so if it's out by like 9, we'll have to move it like 6 inches to just get it to move 3/1000ths of an inch. And we'll have to move it again and move it again. So we're building up a lot of this tension, like this muscle memory in there. And so that stress relief then ends up just relaxing it and setting it in that place. Or that's our goal, to anticipate that. It's like we're happy with where things are at. We've put a lot of tension into it, and there's a lot of pent up energy. Let's try to relax it and set it in place from this point forward.
Do we have any more questions in the group? Sorry, yeah.
Just a quick one back to carbon. And there are a couple guys in the back of the room that might argue with my statement that I don't need an e-bike. But how is the e-bike going?
In what regard? Speed?
Well, is it being well accepted?
Yeah, I mean,
it's such a departure from your.
It's such a departure that it's not well accepted for some people, but like for a lot of people, is how we got to that point. You know, we domestically, there was probably about 5 years of just our dealers that we've had long-term relationships, 20 plus years, you know, 20 bikes a year. Their customer base is skewing that way. You know, it was 5% of their business, then 20% of their business, then 35% of their business. And, you know, their vision is e-bikes are going to be 50% of their business. And they're seeing these Moots customers that, you know, have bought this Moots and then this Moots, and now their next bike, they're not even looking at a Moots, they're looking at an e-bike. So our dealers were pushing. We also had tons of customer requests. Oh, I'd love to buy a Moots gravel bike. I wish you would make an e-bike. Like emails, phone calls, people in public. So it was something that we started looking at in 2015. The third owner of the company in company history came on board in 2015. He's like, what are you guys doing? What do you guys have on the cards for e-bikes? And we're like, nothing. and he's like, this is where the market's going. And we're like, yeah, we don't think so. And he push, interest from this angle. And we're like, man, we just can't do this good out of titanium. It doesn't enhance the material to make an e-bike out of this. Like aesthetically, material characteristics, ride quality wise, cost of goods wise, like it's just not the right thing. So at that point, once we kind of swallowed that pill and kind of went down that path, we're like, okay, we've made composite stuff in the past. Like we've done full suspension mountain bike parts out of composite. We've made forks since 2011. We've made over a dozen different varieties there. You know, we've got some partners that are small in Asia that we've worked with that helped us engineer and understand how this material works. And we started talking to them, and their thing was like, yeah, you absolutely have to use composite for the weight balance, like where the battery weight is, where the torque of the motor is. Like you're just going to fight this with making it out of metal. So we started that project in 2021. Obviously, that time frame in the height of the pandemic, that was a challenge, and the project kind of evolved, kind of took different shape. I wouldn't say midway through, but as the product availability through the pandemic and the product cycle through the pandemic, we actually revised the final product before we brought it to market. So it took us a little longer to get to market, but we're pretty happy with where we ended up. You know, we wanted to make you know, we feel like we understand gravel really well. It's right out our front door, literally. And we understand all facets of it, from steamboat gravel, like racing scene, to adventure gravel like Tour Divide. It rides right through our front door. So we have the bike packing, and like we feel like we really have all the different shapes of gravel right in our perspective, and a lot of good intel from our variety of staff. That's like, if we were going to make an e-bike, that's where it needs to be. Like, that's where we're comfortable. So our geometry and our intended use, that what we ended up with, like, kind of sought those principles out. And then we wanted to make something that we felt comfortable to stand behind, and like that being, like, we were just walking back from breakfast over here, and it's like a lot of those e-bikes, they're not even compliant with the regulations. And like our stuff is, you know, Shimano end-to-end full kit and caboodle, the full system. So everything plays nicely together. Everything is, you know, either CE listed as far as product goes, or UL listed. So from the battery, the drivetrain, and then we tuned it. Like we kind of worked really immensely on getting the ride tuned to where we liked it, so it rode like a bike and not just like a moped. So, you know, we really prioritize range and ride quality. So the way the power comes on was really important to us, and then being able to have more battery life than one ride. So to answer your question in a nutshell, like, we launched the bike in September. There's definitely a lot of blowback from our loyal audience that weren't expecting something like that. Rightfully so. You know, like, we built this, like, we built an audience for 40 some years that expect us to only do handcrafted boutique titanium frames. So such a said departure is very tough to digest, but we're getting a lot of interest there. And then we also got a lot of blowback from people that aren't Moots owners, but what their mindset is of Moots, of like what it should be and like why we're doing this. But we launched in September. First 6 weeks was pretty active on that bike. Going into the holidays and winter, it slowed down a little bit. This past 6 weeks, Hector, it's really picked back up again. And yeah, to what we have coming up, we're going to be, not to blow anybody's mind, but we're not going to be making 6 more e-bikes, but we're going to be making that same e-bike in a whole nother like iteration, and that being more like the flat bar kind of hybrid-y commuter format. Same kind of chassis cockpit intent, but just more of an approachable platform than, like, drop bars aren't for everybody. That's like what a lot of our feedback has been. Like, oh man, this is still too racy of an e-bike. So we're just going to be introducing that in the second build kit here in April, and like, that's our thing. That, like, we kind of want that to happen on the side. Like, it's taken a lot of our energy and our time, like, to develop it to this point and still to build it, even though we're not actually manufacturing the frame in Steamboat Springs, but we're still doing the full assembly. We still did all the engineering and development to this point, and we're still standing behind it. But our goal isn't to be a composite e-bike company by any means. Our goal is just to kind of capture that customer, and like, if like, our aspirations are to sell, you know, 100 to 200 of them alongside of our 1,000 titanium bikes. And like, if it fades away in 2 to 3 years, great. If it turns into that we have a mountain bike e-bike in 2 to 3 years, so be it. So it's kind of coming on. We're only doing it domestically right now due to regulations and all the different things that take place internationally. But there has been a decent amount of demand in Europe that we're working to get through those gates to be able to kind of offer it worldwide.
Nate, I think most people here will know that tomorrow Bespoke are hosting a ride out and a test ride day as well. What would you recommend, if you were coming to it completely fresh, not as a Moots owner already, what would you recommend someone take out and try?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I'm not super familiar with what's right out of the door here, but I would say that the Moots 33 would probably be a good bike. Just thinking about like the broken road surfaces around the city, the larger,
oh, this is harsh. This is harsh, isn't it?
The larger road tire, but still a road bike, would probably be a pretty nice thing. We've got a Route 45, we got a Route CRD. If somebody wants to kind of see what the racier positioning on a gravel bike would look like, or the one by, you know, like we were speaking that with the Bespoke guys today about like how one by is starting to become more and more prolific on drop bar bikes. Like, that could be of interest. But yeah, if I was to go out, when Hector and I go out to ride, because it's not if we're going to make this happen. We're going to take the Moots 33s out and go out for a couple hour ride, hopefully at some point on this trip. But yeah, as Jess mentioned, 9 a.m. tomorrow we'll be here. We have everything from a 50 to a 58, 50, 52, 54, 55, 56, and 58 available. Kind of hoping some people get to throw a leg over it. It's kind of a unique opportunity to be able to bring bikes over here and allow some people to get out and take them out for a ride.
9 till about 3 or 4 tomorrow.
Yeah.
Down that? Drop in. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Have we got any more questions?
Sorry.
Go for it.
So you've come here with the bikes. So are you going anywhere else in Europe while you're here, or is it just the UK and then back to America?
Just the UK, yeah. Yeah, we are going to spend the week here in the UK. Today and tomorrow here with Bespoke. Sunday we're going to transfer out towards Bristol. Be out there on Monday. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday we're going to we're going to be staying in Surrey and then kind of doing the greater, London Central region. Yeah, Southeast, kind of 6 other smaller dealer visits while we're here. So try to get out and about and see a few people. We have a couple other, we have 2 video obligations while we're here. So we're going to be doing something with GCM while we're here, and then also something with David Arthur, if you guys know him, as well. So kind of a little bit of marketing, but also it's just a great time of year. Sun came out today. It's not super warm, but you see that it's starting to transition into that ride season. So it's good to get Hector, myself over here, meet with the people, get some of the bikes out, and just start getting that energy going again. And things will just start getting busier and busier. So, yeah, Europe's tough. It's not all distribution through Europe, and I'll just leave it at that. It's hard to hit it all in one trip. Yeah.
Fingers crossed for good weather then for this week.
Yeah. Or come prepared.
We're not going anywhere just yet, but I think we're getting a bit closer, Dan. I think, are we to doing our raffle draw?
Yep.
Unless anyone's got any more burning questions, but we're hanging around, so I'm sure you can ask. You can ask some questions. Should we give a bicycle frame away?
We should. Yeah, absolutely.
That I can't have.
So let me just pull up.
You're not going to let this go, are you?
Well, there we go.
We're not allowed to. Okay. So just to tell everyone, everyone that's here that's not in the trade, your names are in a random name picker, and this is to win a Moots 33, which doesn't exist yet, so it will be in your site. So basically, myself, we'll speak at the end. I'll contact you, and then you can win a frame. Choose frame size. So let me just get this started now. I think it's going to give me a countdown. We'll go countdown from 5, Jez, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, you want me to do this? No, I'm not even giving it away. I'm having nothing to do with this.
It actually is on a timer?
I couldn't care less about this bit.
Okay, 16 participants, you're all here. So just to confirm, make sure there's no penalties in the groups going on. Oh, it's from 10, Jez. So
8, 7, 6. Oh, 3.
Man, the anticipation.
2. If I was in this, I'd be very nervous. Right now.
Yeah, no, I want to say
yeah, absolutely.
That was all on camera too. No better winner could have been on camera right there. It was all captured. Well, congratulations.
See you later.
Yeah. Work's done.
Wow.
There we go. Thank you.
It doesn't happen often.
No.
Look at that. Yeah. Well, everyone, thank you. First of all, big thank you to all the guys from Bespoke for hosting this as well. But thank you to you guys from Moots as well for coming and doing it. Make sure you get an opportunity to ride one of these bikes tomorrow if you haven't got one already, or come and try a new one if you want to as well.
Yep.
And hang around because we're staying around for a while. So.
There's a lot of beer to drink. We'll be here all evening, so been around for a bit. If you haven't been here before, please have a look downstairs at the workshop because we spent a lot of time designing the workshop and building that, and we've got some cool stuff down there. So yeah, hang around for a bit. No need to rush off. Drink some beer, soft drinks, and thanks everyone for coming. Thanks to Nate.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job.
Fucking is.
Yeah, congratulations.
This is what I've already got.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, no, I don't. Sorry.
Okay.
I've got others first.
Okay,
But in this one.
perfect.
So,
Not bad, eh?
you know, I started a new job on Monday. I thought there's no way I can get here today.